Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, Area Sales Manager Avery Bennett from the Southeast Iowa and Northeast Missouri area joins us with an update on his territory. Avery highlights his experience working with us as an ASM. Hear about what's going on from soybean to wheat, to planting test plots, to replant, to weather conditions. Find out what Merschman soybean varieties farmers are growing in Avery's area.
Hi, this is Joe Merschman. Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we have Ben, Lynn, and a special guest, one of our area sales managers. Lynn, I'll let you introduce him.
Yeah, so to continue on with our area sales manager special we've got going on, we have an in-house guest for today. So Avery, if you want to tell the folks at home a little bit about yourself and the area that you cover.
Perfect. Yeah, my name's Avery Bennett. Been on once or twice, but I cover the home territory here, so Southeast Iowa and Northeast Missouri, number 17. So I go pretty much from the Mississippi clear to almost to I-35 and then 9 counties in Missouri. So a wide range of area, but it's exciting because I'm able to hit double crop beans here in Iowa, or double crop wheat and beans here in Iowa, and then corn and soybeans. Just it's a lot going on.
So talk about the territory a little bit. Where's planting progress at right now?
Yeah. So, we've been very fortunate in our territory on the weather and just the efficiencies farmers have had. I've not seen a year, and I was talking to a few farmers. I said, when have you been this efficient before? And unfortunately, they said 2012, which 2012 wasn't a good year for them. And I think we were getting a little worried, but we fortunately got that rain last weekend. But I'd say we're pretty much 95%, 90 to 95% totally complete. We do have some stragglers here and there, finishing up with beans, but majority of the corn's in, and the beans just wrapping up. So if we hit another good spell, 2 or 3 more days, I think our farmers are gonna call it a planting season. So it's been an exciting season. I think my truck's had about 4,000 miles on it within the last 3 weeks. So that's one thing I'm really good at this time of the year is filling up the gas tank and emptying it right away. So sorry about that, Joe. My gas bill might be a little high.
You got to just quit driving around. You got to stop once in a while and see people.
But hey, when you pull the little trailers, putting out fires, my fuel efficiency is not that good.
Yeah, I don't know if you know what he's talking about, but all of our Merschman reps have box trailers and can haul up to 120 bags. So many times our customers will just call directly, our dealers will call directly to our salesperson and say, I need beans, and he'll give them the exact time he's going to be there. So it's part of our service to our customers. We know that anybody can show up with a semi, but the last 60 bags or last 30 bags, whatever it is to finish the field, are the most important to the farmer at that time.
Yeah, some of our competitors are probably not on good terms with us or not liking us because we're able to take advantage of those last minute or last decisions right there.
So talk just a little bit about what's going on out in the field right now. What have you been looking at the past week and a half, and what's on the top of guys' mind right now?
Yeah, we'll just start off with probably the wheat. We're kind of more farther along in that progress of that crop. Wheat in my territory is easy. We're at heading, so we're in anywhere in my northern central territory. Yesterday I saw the wheat was right at Feeks 10, so the head was just coming out, fully developed. But then as you further get south, like around here at the home place, we're probably Feeks 10.5, 10.51, so that's meaning that we're about to start flowering, and so we're going to see those Miravis Ace or Neo, right, fungicides applications happening, and going on that aspect. Flag leaves looking good. The one thing about Merschman wheat is, the head size is pretty impressive this year. So if it doesn't yield, I'm excited about this time of the year.
I just want to say one thing about wheat. Right now, we're not seeing a lot of disease. Is that right, Avery?
Yeah, it's clean. It's clean, and when we have our farmers that really like the fungicide and good high quality wheat, we don't have to worry about the disease pressure. But every wheat field I've gone through, I can't say I've seen anything. Ben, have you?
No, it's been a very clean year so far.
And the other thing, it's been very cool, and that actually favors wheat, no different than it does with corn. As soon as we get into pollination, if we can slow down that fill process, we'll actually gain more yield. my dad back in the 80s went over to England, and he was trying to bring back at that time 100 bushel wheat, because they were raising 100 bushel wheat. We were raising 50. And what he found out is the climate over there is a little cooler than it is here. So just like corn, when you get a lot of heat units and it speeds that fill process up, it usually hurts yield. Those years when we have the wet corn in the fall, we usually get the high yields, is because we had a longer fill period. Same thing holds for wheat. So I would say so far, we're just, when you say, Ben, we've got the base laid for a really high yield on wheat this year.
Yeah, things look pretty good. So I was looking back at our records from last year. For our seed production, we were starting to spray fungicide on May 17th last year, and I have to get out my phone and look at what today's date is. Today is the 12th, so we are 5 to 6 days ahead of schedule. So we have a lot of our Binti, which is our ultra early line that's commercially available. It had all of its fungicide applied 5 days earlier, and we're hitting that flowering time frame like Avery was talking about. Pretty dead nuts on where we need to be for getting that application done in a timely manner based off of the rain that's coming in for the forecast here. But I think that it's going to be one of those years where the ultra early lines are going to be coming off in that middle of June time frame here again, like where we were last year, just because we're 5 days earlier than where we were last year, and we had a record early crop come in last year.
Yeah, today's really the first day we've had a lot of humidity. So it's, that's what brings on that disease, when you got that lush growth. And so, definitely a fungicide, even though today doesn't look like you got a lot of disease, I'd be looking at it, because the weather's not going to consistently stay like this. It's going to get humid, and it can turn wet very fast, and then you've got to be ahead of disease. You cannot fight from behind it.
Do you see, when we have these type of conditions, is there more advantageous to the early wheat or the later wheat, or is it one of those where it's just kind of a wash? It's going to be what it'll be. It'll stay true to maybe the longer season wheat might be slightly higher, or does cooler conditions inhibit or make the early wheat just a little bit more attractive offering than a later wheat from a yield standpoint?
I will let you know that when I know what the fill period looks like, how many days that we have to fill, from like what Joe was talking about.
Yeah, I would say the same thing with Ben. I agree, and Ben's the expert, but I would say the fill period is going to determine that. So if we get a long fill period for these early varieties, that's going to benefit them. I mean, that'll help them, because as a general rule, when you're just like short season corn, you just don't have the fill period, don't usually have the yield. But if you get cooler conditions, favors that longer fill period for these early varieties, you're going to see a good yield. And we've been overcoming some of that maturity yield issues. Ben's been picking some really good products. He's got one that he looks at probably every day down and close to his home, the new, what we're going to call hyper early. Potentially, it's even earlier than what we have with the Binti. So
right. So when you look at that Millie 8 product is going to be its name for your hyper early line, it was actually planted 3 weeks later than the Binti that was headed out, and we are headed out as well. We're probably 3 or 4 days behind from that Binti that was planted earlier, but I think that product is going to come off in a very, very timely manner, even though it was planted 3 weeks later. It looks good, and I'm really excited to start showing pictures of that once we get closer to senescence time frame. So
yeah, Ben's got this idea for marketing. Is that a guy goes, "What are you doing with your combine?" And he goes, "I'm putting it in the shed." "Don't you have to cut your wheat?" "I got it all done." That's how early it is.
Yeah, I'm really excited, because the double crop option is really what we're chasing. So high yielding ultra early wheat, and then being able to get beans planted in the last half of June rather than the first half of July is going to make for excellent double crop beans as well. So
and move it farther north. Move it up to where you can consistently double crop I-80 south. I mean, that's our goal. I mean, that's what we'd like to do. So we'll see.
Which in other years would probably fall into your planting window just fine, but this year is that anomaly. So,
yep. Right. Yeah. And then kind of moving on probably from wheat, we're going to go to corn and soybeans. I mean, the early planted stuff, as I was traveling out west here this week, Stuff's been in the ground. I'd say the first stuff I heard of going in the ground was 32 days ago, 32, 31 days ago. And that stuff's sitting around B4. I mean, right around there. But the soybeans, probably the farthest along soybeans I've seen is, VC. And we were looking at a field yesterday, and it got some hail damage there, but we're not too concerned about it. And so kind of on just growth ratings there, overall replant situations are going to be very low, I think, in my territory. Like I mentioned, is the efficiency and the planting conditions this year for farmers have just been nothing but good, honestly. And they've been able to have their windows to get in the field and be as efficient as they could. Not many big breakdowns. I kind of try to catch in with dealers or farmers I know, and I haven't heard of anybody really complaining about 2-day windows of being broke down. So I don't know if they spent the winter in the shop and doing the maintenance that they should be doing, but kudos to them. So we had that window. We were getting a little dry, is what we were kind of getting scared of. And then last weekend we were fortunate enough to get a good rain. So depending on my territory, like I said, let's just start in the west, over there by I-35. They got anywhere between probably ½ inch to almost a shy inch. They said it was a nice, slow rain, beautiful. So those farmers and dealers were very, very pleased with that rain shower. As you worked east, you get right to the Mississippi, let's say Mount Union or Mediapolis, which would be about an hour north here of West Point. Their rainfall equaled about 3 inches. They caught a 5 o'clock rain shower on Sunday that came in hard and fast, and then all through the night Sunday, they got rain. So eastern part of the territory, I'd say they ranged anywhere between a good inch to 1/4 to 3 inches. But the places that got the good amount of rain, it was amazing to see a 2-day window of how much soybeans just popped up out of the ground. Because there was some fields that I was looking at that were maybe a potential replant or concern of replant. Because those soybeans were just pushing up, and the amount of dirt that they were pushing up was, it was 4 or 5 inches of, probably 4 inches of dirt that 3 little plants were trying to just crank out. And when they got that shower and got that, moisture, it was amazing what a 2-day window changed the, stand count. And going into replant, stand counts is, maybe something we could hit on for the guys out there.
Yeah. So, Lynn, what do you look at when you're doing your stand counts? I know that you and Avery have been out looking at beans this past week.
Yeah. I'll interrupt right here. If you want a stand count without a tape measure or anything, get a hold of Ben, because he's money.
I'll be Lynn.
Sorry, Lynn. He is money.
Anyway.
Is that what he uses, his $100 bills for 6 inches, measuring 6 inches?
For a little backstory, and not for self-bragging here, but the discussion was with Avery when the year comes when he has it, you'll get really good at doing stand counts just by visual, because a couple years ago we had a pretty tough weather event, basically all through Area 17, and I looked at enough replant fields that you could just visually tell what it is, and kind of being halfway facetious, I was like, yeah, measure that there. It's about 102,000 plant stand. And he measured it off, and I'll be honest, I just threw, I knew it was between 100 and 115, threw a number out of my rear and hit it dead on. But when we look at that, to what we were talking about the other day, I think the biggest thing is your eyes will not lie to you. When you look at it and at first thought you think that looks pretty thin, it's thin. And with replant, it's a very emotional time. Joe, you've alluded to it a lot. You're stressed. You're trying to figure out, am I good? Am I not? So the first thing is, your first impression is probably the accurate impression. Try to keep the emotion out of it. The two biggest things that I run into with guys, try to look at the rows perpendicular. Don't try to look down the rows, because you can kind of fill in some gaps that aren't there. If you look at it sideways, you can see the spacing or the holes. When we look at replant, we're basically trying to determine the stand count, and then we want to judge the consistency of the stand count. So when we're looking at that, what I mean by consistency is, do we have pockets of holes that are over 18 inches? The beans won't be able to fill in. Are we going to be able to cover the row? Are we going to have maybe some issues later in season with the late flushes of water hemp by not getting coverage? So,
and you want to look at the health of the soybeans that are left there too.
Exactly.
The ones that are up. Make sure they're not going to die.
Correct.
Diseased.
And you were we were looking at some of them yesterday. We either had some that were frosted off that were on the way back. They're probably not going to make it. They're still kind of green, and then the hail ones that had basically busted off every growing point that you could see just the stem there, and those aren't going to count for anything. So exactly, you want to make sure that it's viable. The other thing would be, depending on the time frame of planting, make sure that you're checking the actual spots for beans that are still trying to push through. I would say this year we're having a little bit of issue with residue, and that's a pretty gross overstatement, but for everything that we've looked at, either hairpinning of residue into the seed trench, or the residue just didn't let that ground get warm back up as fast when we had those kind of the highs and lows after Easter. So anyone that planted the week after Easter, good window, then it was cold, then it was hot, then it was cold. And that the ground that had tillage was able to recuperate their 4-inch or 2-inch soil temp very quickly, and it seemed like the no-till or the heavy residue ground just wasn't able to get flying back up, and we're just seeing really slow or delayed emergence when it comes to that. So that's another one.
Let me recap that now. You say, okay, we had frost.
Yep.
We had hail. We had crust, and then heavy rains, and perfect stands, huh?
There is spots of you just kind of shake your head in bewilderment, like how did this make it through? And there's other spots that it's not as heinous as what it could be, especially when you take revisionist history here and look at what all the little guys went through to get to that point. But most of it, I would say, is residue is really causing our biggest issue. The hail probably knocked out a plant here or there. Frost probably knocked out a plant here and there, but residue management is definitely got to be something on the forefront. It's going to be one of those things that potentially could change year to year as well. Talking with the farmer that we visited with, if he would have went in and vertical tilled or field cultivated, and we caught that big rain and then got hot and that thing turned to concrete, probably made a really poor decision to vertical till that. This year just didn't work out. So that's back. We always preach, and I think Iowa State does a really good job at this, is look at the here and now, but also look at the forecast moving forward. Make your decision based on all the facts that you have in front of you. I'm pushing it to a week out now. Like, look 7 days out, see what that forecast looks like to make the decision in the moment. Yeah, it could be really, really good, and it's really hard to pass up, but maybe that's not the right thing to do, as Chris Ehler mentioned too. Like, maybe you plan on the last 2 days of the hot streak instead of the first 2 days. Make sure those beans are protected in the ground and not trying to get out ahead of their shoes too much. But it is replant is just so hard. You and I have had discussions over the years as well as this. What is the right and wrong decision on replant? Typically that doesn't come to fruition until the end of the year. You don't realize that, because we've had stands of 70,000 even spaced, 98% of the yield potential. We've had replant come stab back in June and have done 95% of the yield potential of what was left. So it's a very emotional decision, but it's one that should be taken very seriously, because there's the time consequence, there's the wear and tear in your machine. It can be physically exhausting to go in and replant, especially on the corn side of it when you're trying to row that in. But just make sure you're clear-minded and coming through with the best facts that you have, and don't be afraid to call your trusted seed advisors and ask for that second opinion, because a lot of times it's not as bad as what you think, and someone can help you out on that.
Generally speaking, it's a complete generalization. Normally, it does not pay to replant. Normally, and you can get down to 2.5 beans per foot a row in 30-inch rows, and you'll be still have the potential for yield. So, how low? I can tell you in the process to bring new varieties, we'll plant at 6 pounds per acre, and they'll yield 75% of normal at 6 pounds per acre, which is 18,000, maybe 20,000 plants. I would not leave that, but what I'm saying is that what is your minimum that you would leave if it was fairly uniform? What is your minimum right now? What would you say?
Right now, if it was 70,000, I'd have no issues leaving that. None. When we get into the 60s, I probably get just a little bit hesitant because it seems like by and large, when we get into the 60,000, it's just real world is never usually uniform.
We have one seed grower in Burlington, Iowa that plants at 80,000. That's what he drops, 80,000. And if he doesn't get 80 bushels per acre, he's not happy. So don't be afraid at that 70 is what I would agree with you. Not at all. It wouldn't bother me at all. But weed control will be your biggest problem when you have thinner stands because you don't have the canopy quite as quick. So you got to fight that battle. So that's when you got to be more progressive and getting your small weeds killed early, in my opinion, because sunshine is never wasted. It's going to grow either a soybean plant or a weed. It's never wasted. Mother Nature doesn't let you waste it.
Exactly, and I think that's a good point too. If you're going to leave a thin stand, make sure that you're, especially on soybeans, because we don't get that crop canopy like we do in corn. Make sure you're laying your residuals so that way that last flush of water hemp doesn't end up being both an eyesore and an economic sore for you late in the season.
Right, and choose your residuals very wisely. There are some nice PPO products that you can lay in that may have a better residual than like a Dual or an Outlook or a Residua style of product too. So you could use a product like Famecivin or like that style of PPO that has some activity on helping kill weeds, but also laying a nice residual down as well. So be very cognizant of that as well. So.
Well, I completely hijacked your Cup of Joe episode there on replant.
I think it's been a good one. And you talk about residue management. Ben and I were kind of up by Richland, Fairfield area yesterday, and it would have been a week ago Monday, they got hit with some high winds. And it's kind of like they almost straight line, but almost tornado style. And the people that ran their vertical tillage across the field, they won't have any trouble. Their residue's gone, and maybe we can throw a picture up here, but all that corn residue that was on that field is just filled the ditches. I was standing
like snowdrifts.
Yeah, just like snowdrifts, and then along a fence row, it's just piled up. And I was standing in a ditch yesterday, and it came up to my knees of how much corn residue was there, and it's kind of gut wrenching to see all that. It is what it is, kind of deal.
One of those deals where it's going to be another problem for those people to manage where all that residue landed, because it's the stuff you and I were looking at yesterday. It was 150 feet of no crop's going to come off. They're going to have to burn it off or do something with it. So
that's in the fall now where you're starting to see farmers put on products that break down that residue, try to minimize it going into spring. So you have, you got the double-edged sword there. You want to protect the soil, but yet you don't want to have to fight the residue. So there are products out there now that farmers are using, biologicals and even nitrogen, that can help the farmer manage that residue. But yeah, I would agree with you. We just got a new planter, and we're doing some modifications that have to do with residue today. I mean, we're done planting, but we're already modifying our planter for next year to manage residue better. So yeah.
Welcome to being a farmer, Joe. You're chasing last year's problems this year.
I'd rather be a seedsman than a farmer. The farmer's got way too many more things to manage. I mean, that equipment side alone is uncanny. I mean, it's just crazy that all the different options and choices on planters today, and what precision planting involves, and the satellites and all that stuff. It's just amazing how efficient our American farmers are. It just blows me away every year how fast they can get things done and how efficient. And then you go out and see the stands that are perfect. As you're looking, those picket fence corn stands and everything, there's just no better farmer in the world than the American farmer, and that's something that's not going to get outsourced to China or India, I don't think.
You're absolutely correct. So those picket fence style stands, when you're talking corn-wise, Avery, have you done any corn stand counts? How even did the corn come up? Or you got many customers talking about what's the corn stand look like? We talked about bean replant a little bit. What's your corn sales look like, and the stands from that?
I think the corn replant, or the situation on that, is planting date. What influenced on some corn replant situation. Like I was driving by a field that I drive by every day, and I'm like, oh, that's a nice field. And then I noticed one night when I was driving home, I see fresh tire tracks in there, and it's not a customer of ours, but a local friend. So I pulled in. I said, you guys like, what did you do in your field? He's like, oh, we replanted it, and it was like 32,000. And I'm like, well, I would have probably left it. I mean, for me. But he wants every kernel that he puts in the ground, he wants it coming up. But then we've had some situations that got hit with that frost, and and the stand was thin. But I didn't go out there assess that. I think you guys did that for me because I was out delivering beans for another customer. And so replant or corn stands, I haven't done a lot of stand counts. I need to get on that, but
I think what we're noticing so far, and you were in your neck of the woods, planted a little bit earlier than what we did. I'll admit I'm a little more conservative, so in our operation I was a little bit slower than you guys were. All that first planted stuff seemed like it stayed in the ground for a little bit. It's definitely off to the races now. Emergence looks, on everything that I've looked at, once again, residue management was very important to corn emergence. Everything looked to be emerged within that 24-hour window. And then every window that we had thereafter, I would say the stuff planted last week came up within 7 days. And the stuff planted then like the beginning of that week or like that Friday, maybe 1 or 2 day ahead of the curve there as far as emergence goes. But I think our emergence window, whether it was planted super early or planted a week ago, we're really probably 1 to 2 leaf stages difference between stuff planted basically Easter to the stuff planted even 7 days ago. So I think by and large, all of our stand counts look really well. I also want to give a shout out to the Merschman corn. The emergence on that looked extremely promising in the situations that they were put in. Cold, wet soil, seed treatment. Kudos to you for running that. Looks like it survived some adverse weather conditions and came out of the ground roaring and ready to go, which is exactly what we want corn to do. We don't want, we talk about beans, we'll let it kind of sit and dilly-daddle and sit underground. On corn, we want it to get busy, and we definitely have, and across multiple brands too. I know a lot of folks, neighbors that plant different brands of corn, and I think everyone's stuff maybe early waited for a little bit, but everything that came in the week after that came roaring out of the ground. So I think locally those guys should be very excited about we've started corn on the right foot. We did job number 1 correct. Now we have to continue to manage that corn as we go through the growing season, but we've laid the foundation very, very well.
Yeah, about yesterday and the day before were about the first replant calls I kind of went to, because I've been just putting out fires on last minute beans, which I think Joe wants the beans in the ground, right?
That's right. We want to make sure that when they buy a bag of Merschman soybeans, number 1, they're going to get good advice, when it comes to when you have problems, and then when you need product, we're going to make sure it's there too. We worked extremely hard all winter because we anticipated that farmers are moving very quickly to planting soybeans first, and that's totally foreign to soybean companies, because we always say, oh, we got till May 1st. So now we only have till April 1st at the latest. And so we lost a month of production time. So we had to figure out how to speed up our process, and that's what we did. I mean, there's a lot of folks around here who were not happy with me as hard as we were pushing them in November and December and January. And so, but it paid off because we had all our seed shipped before the farmers needed it.
And I want to say, give a shout out to our logistics team, Chase, Brian, and Shannon. I mean, they just did a heck of a job this year. I mean, I've never, like you were talking, Lynn, I mean, we've never had a year that usually our little wagons or trailers is what I call, I call it a wagon, but the amount of times we're hauling seed, they've saved our rear ends quite a bit this year. So kudos to them. If you see them out and about, say thank you, please.
So to close this out, Avery, I always ask the question, what are you excited for in this coming growing season? What are some of your customers trying different? What are you excited about? Is there any beans that you're excited about? What keeps Avery moving and excited for the 23 crop season?
Well, what keeps me moving, I'm young and, I'm trying to learn a lot. So any opportunity to, just see just something out of the ordinary, is, I'm just trying to absorb as much from each and every one of you guys. So every day is a learning environment for me, so it's exciting that way. But what keeps me moving is, our beans are so good now. The varieties that we have out there is just, it's the Chicago Bulls back then in lineup. The Monroe is probably, if I have soil types that just vary here and there, the Monroe for the new products is the one I'm just going to throw at it. The Kennedys, that thing's, you can't guess wrong on it. So the Kennedy, the Monroe, the Truman, the Truman's one thing I just say, hey, what's the soil conditions like? I'll probably make sure that we put it on the better soil because it needs that extra little juice, that little gas to make sure that you can see the wow potential in it. But then you get down to the McKinley. That thing just, for that maturity group, I have a farmer / dealer up there by Oskaloosa, and the McKinley's his rock star bean. He just, it's like almost a child to him. And what he does is he planted it on the May 5th, one last year. It did 78 across the field. This year he planted on May 6th, and so he's just like, and he's like, I plant the McKinley always on the best dirt, and I plant it try around the same time because I want to see what the year and how the year environment influences that bean, because I know it can just hit home runs for it. So those guys, Monroe, Kennedy, Truman, McKinley are probably the ones that really excite me. We have a new 3-1 that's going to come down in the lineup that's going to, fill in a big gap for us, I believe. And then on the corn side, I think we were missing an opportunity to, get on the farmer's ground or, just be able to manage our high quality product in every aspect in a farmer. And I believe, with the treatment and everything that you're going to provide for us on our corn side, I think that's going to be the really exciting thing, is see how much of, through the growing season, understand the characteristics of each hybrid that we have there in the corn lineup, and then going into the next year with, I think the farmers are going to be excited, and I think we're going to make a lot of noise.
I would have a tendency to agree. And then Avery and I had the opportunity to do something I've never done last night. Avery and I put in a replicated corn plot from multiple different breeding programs that we're looking at, both experimentals and the numbers that we've already named. I got to sit on the back of an automated 4-row plot planner. That was really, really cool. So we're excited to keep notes on these new corn numbers and know the ins and outs of them, so we can really help our growers position corn the same way we do with our soybeans. So a lot of good stuff going on right now. So I think that is a good time for Joe to take us home.
All right. Well, I don't know if you guys knew, last week I had a little accident. I don't know if you knew that. I ran into a lamppost, and luckily I only sustained light injuries. Now
that's not bad.
That's pretty good. I'm just warming up here now. Now the last one, we've got to be real trendy, with our jokes, and I've even looked into using artificial intelligence, but the ones I saw that it's generated so far are not too good. But I did see an application with artificial intelligence that turned out pretty cool. I hear they've made a new artificially intelligent Oreo. Can you believe that? It's one smart cookie. Okay, we'll do better next week, I promise. Okay, all right. Anyhow, thanks Avery for coming in today. Appreciate your insight. I don't know if you know, but Avery also is a weed scientist. So I mean, when it comes to anything to do with weeds, he's our go-to guy here at Merschman Seeds. But as always, we hope that you and your family are safe, and we appreciate your business. And don't forget, this weekend is Mother's Day, this Sunday. So don't forget Mom. We wouldn't be here without her. So anyhow, see you next week. Take care.